You're listening to The Art of Imperfect Adulting. I'm your host, Amy Stone. Here, I share stories from real people navigating the adventure that I call adulting. Are you ready? Me too. Let's do this. Well, hello, friends. Good to see you again. Today, my guest is Kym Coco. We're going to talk about grief and we're going to talk about golf. We're going to find out how those two things go together. Are you ready for a fun chat today, Kym?
I am. Thank you so much for having me, Amy. It's a pleasure to be here and talk about really the adventure of adulting.
Very nice, very nice. I always start all my conversations with this same first question. What part of the world do you call home?
I am in the Sierra Nevadas, north of Lake Tahoe in
Love that
California.
answer. Love that answer. I love to see the videos sometimes of the snow around, I think, Truckee on the road to Truckee where it doesn't always happen, but sometimes it gets really high. All right. So what is something that you love about living in that part of the world?
It's extraordinarily peaceful. I think during the winter months, my neighbors are more in population as osprey and animals than any people. And you can watch the ospreys circling in the cove, going to dive in for their dinner or breakfast, and it's just serene.
I love that. I love that. All right. That is very cool. Next question, which is my warm up question that I've started asking people. This is how I sneak in, try and ask people how old they are without actually asking them how old they are. Of the generation identifiers that we use, silent generation, baby boomer, Gen X, millennial, and Gen Z, which one of those matches you the best?
Can I say F? I don't identify with a label.
Yeah,
I don't really
sure.
know. I'm in my 40s. How does that work?
That's perfect. No, I love that. That's a perfect example. All right. Very, very good. All right. So I mentioned this before. We are going to talk about grief and loss. And this seems to me like an unusual strategy for moving through grief. But let's begin by setting the stage and defining the actors, right? So in your pitch, you shared that you knew that Steve was dying, but I don't know who Steve is. Let's start with this. Like, tell us who Steve is and what was going on at the time.
Yes, Steve is my late husband. He was a great resource to me when I was finishing my master's degree in kinesiology. He was teaching emotional kinesiology. I had this sports background, and friends introduced us. And it was this beautiful blending of minds and hearts. And we started a really wonderful marriage for 13 years. However, the last two of those, Steve had become very ill.
Okay.
There was a very sudden trip to the hospital in December where we didn't think he'd exit 48 hours later. And it was after that trip that we decided to simplify our lives, reprioritize, and say what matters most. And so we'd connect in the mornings and do audiobooks, uh, audio recordings essentially that will become books, one of which is Miracle on the Mountainside, which is his story behind me. And giving ourselves a purpose in that time together to just be in love and be present with each other.
Okay.
And during that time frame, he said, "Girl, you're going to need structure when I'm gone." And I teared up because I knew he's right. I like spontaneity. I like to play. I like to plan the trips and get out and explore. And the structure can be boring to me, although boredom has its value. And so, structure, once he was gone, looked like showing up regularly for people, getting out in nature, anything really that would help me get out of sadness of the past or worry about my future and being involved in something larger than just that moment. And so I had the inspiration. Steve got me into the game of golf. Why not play 100 new golf courses in honor of him?
Okay.
And
We're going to
that's
get
how
to
it ties
that.
together.
We're going to get to that
Yes.
because I have so many questions, but you said a lot there and I want to take a second to really recap it. So you guys met when you were graduate students and you were both studying a form of kinesiology. Is that correct?
He was already in the workforce in
Okay.
Chico. and I was finishing my master's program.
And I think you said that he was somebody who worked on emotional kinesiology. I've never heard what
Yes.
that is. Like, I know this is not a question about you; it's a question about him. But what, for if anybody else out there is like me and thinking, oh, I always thought that kinesiology was the body. What does emotional kinesiology even mean?
I would describe it as the way we use the body to understand the emotional landscape underneath. So if you've ever utilized applied kinesiology, say for chiropractics or diagnosing a physical imbalance, you can do the same and address the emotional body and how that interacts with our physiology.
Okay, that is very interesting. Thank you for explaining that to me because I had never heard those words go together. Okay, so you guys were married for over a decade, I think 13 years. You have an emergency trip to the hospital is what it sounds like. And then at that point were you given like he was given a terminal diagnosis, you knew that he was going to pass? Like is that how this happened that suddenly?
I will take you back to Steve pre Kim and Steve chapter where he had a motorcycle accident.
Okay.
And that's actually how his story in the book opens up because he's traveling up this beautiful, windy mountain road in the summer. His bike hits shale and he decides to jump the guardrail so he doesn't get caught between bike and metal. Only it was a cliff instead of a soft landing on the other side. So he underwent 28 reconstructive surgeries, 3 years in a hospital bed, three more to learn how to walk, and a whole life transformation. So he had some issues,
Okay.
some compounding concerns that it seemed came together in the perfect medical storm. And so the hospital trip was just starting to say, okay, well, what's the root cause? It actually took over a year to find the pituitary tumor that was causing his hormonal imbalance, which was the one of the biggest causes of his discomfort.
Okay. All right. So there was an emergency room visit. There was a year of investigation and medical confusion, and so on. But you do hit a point where you know, I guess that he's got cancer, and you know that it's coming to an end, and that's when you guys begin to discuss. You're going to need some structure. There's a part of this story that's going to happen, and I'm not going to be here.
Yes, and we were very honest from the beginning of our relationship. He knew he had medical issues. I called him high maintenance jokingly, and yet he was. He had a lot of concerns. And so it was okay to say candidly and openly, let's talk about this every step along the way.
All right. So you guys had an open conversation about this. He introduced you to golf. That's the golf connection.
Yes.
All right. So he comes to you and he says that he thinks structure will help you. I think that makes sense. But what you decided to do was these 100 new golf courses as an adventure. So why 100?
A framework, a reason to have a number to achieve, a way to give myself time to get back into the game because I
Okay.
had taken time off while caregiving. It's a great number. Why not?
Okay.
I'm
All right.
ambitious.
I do think it's ambitious. I do think it's ambitious. I like the number. I choose 100 for a lot of things, but I do find myself that when I set myself challenges, we're like 100, like I'm in the middle of about two-thirds of the way through a 100 thing challenge. And every so often I'm like, I wonder if 50 would have been enough. Like, it's like, did I actually need 100? So it is ambitious, but there's nothing wrong with that. So you come up with this challenge. You don't start working on this though until after he passes.
Yes. And Amy, what's interesting is right after Steve transitioned, my sister and brother in law were out from the Midwest, invited me to Southern California. It's 70 degrees in December. Come play golf. Come to a game with us. And I thought, sure, that sounds great. It's a way to get me out, get started. And it was too sad. It was an idyllic day. I was with my brother in law. It was beautiful. And it was hard without Steve.
Yeah.
2 weeks later, I tried again in Santa Barbara. Still really hard. It took another 8 months for me to even come out and golf with my friends here in Northern California. and I met some new people. They introduced me to new courses. I started to get very interested again, and yet it still took me until the following February to say, yes, now's the time I'm committing.
Okay, so it wasn't an immediate thing. So you had this idea and a framework and a plan before Steve transitioned, but it was more than a year after he passed before you were actually able to start. Okay, that I think that's an important thing to share because so you said that Steve introduced you to golf. Did you guys golf together while you were
Yes.
married? Okay, so grief is one of those things. It's very very hard to move through it 100%. There were a couple more parts of this project that I think that you shared with me on your pitch. It's 100 new golf courses. That was the idea to give you structure and help you move through it, help you carve a new path for yourself, and also write a memoir. So I'm curious about the book. Let's talk about that. Like, did you guys talk about writing his memoir before he died? Was this always a part of the plan? Did it come up after he passed? Like, where did that come from?
It was part of the plan. So he would tell stories about his life in those conversations we had while he was still here. And you and I both know many conversations go all over the map. And it was fun in those first months by myself without him to go back through those conversations and sort them out. This would go great in the relationships book. This is going to go great in our Awaken Your Spirituality book. Oh, I really like this story he told here. Let's put that in his memoir. And then to take the next year or year and a half to dissect which ones were going to make the cut, which ones really fleshed out his life in a way that you who've never met Steve would appreciate and understand the message he wanted to share as a teacher, what changed his life after his motorcycle accident, that our mind and our emotions really have a lot more control in how we view ourselves, how we carve out our new life, how we participate in our healing, and so these snippets of stories from his motorcycle accident to his parents to a divorce to having a near death experience to having a nurse hear him say, I want to keep my leg, don't cut it off in surgery. And then have the nurse come in 2 weeks later and say, you couldn't have told me that because you had tubes down your nose and throat, but I heard you tell me, and we're going to get your second opinion like you wanted. So, all of these different stories of his life, which he was so interesting and very dramatic. I don't think we have to go over a cliff to start to learn these lessons and to have a sense of agency in our lives. And yet, he just had a really vibrant life. So, to share it in a way that he felt good about while he was alive, and then I could honor him in text form, it's been a gift.
Okay, so this is a project that you guys started working on together while he was still alive. And then
Yes.
you finished it, you completed it as part of the golf project. Okay, all right, very good. So that's the book. So the did it work? Like, so it takes a year before you have a couple false starts where it's too emotional and too close before you're able to begin the project. You begin the process of trying to rack up 100 new golf courses as a part of moving your way through the groove. Was it effective? Was this a good way for you to do this? What happened?
It was a great way. I think play is a fantastic vehicle to be in the present. Play is spontaneous, it's creative. I couldn't hit a golf ball if I was worried about the past or sad or anxious about what's to come. There's a way to show up and rely on something my body knows how to do already. I didn't have to overthink it. And in fact, when I overthought any experience, it tended to create more anxiety. So play was a way to give myself a little bit of lightheartedness in the grief, because grief can be overwhelming. And there were times on this journey where I would write a chapter, let's say, and I would miss Steve tremendously, and I would take time to really be with that sadness and let it flow through me so that I would have the space to again show up at the next course and play and be present for that experience and welcome in the joy at a high level of volume, a way that I could really find myself and joy with myself. It's almost like I needed a permission slip to do that, but I had to feel it all the way through.
I hear that a lot from people who are talking about grief. Permission to feel the emotions and the challenge of really allowing the full emotion experience. I get the sense, based on my own lived experience and the fact that it's a theme that repeats in conversations with a bunch of people, that it is maybe one of those human experiences where we almost have to learn it through doing. That it's like people can tell you, like, you feel the feelings and really allow the feelings. It feels to me, and I'm not an expert or a person who gets to decide this, but that is maybe one of those human experiences where even if we know it's coming, we might actually need to walk it ourselves a little bit. I'm
I
not
think
sure.
one of my favorite quotes is words don't teach. It's life experience that teaches. And as much as Steve and I, quote, prepared for what my life could be like once he was gone, I had to literally walk through that myself.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So 100, how long does it take you to play a round of golf?
Anywhere from 4 to 6 hours.
4 to 6 hours. All right. So this is a time consuming to do this 100 times, no matter how much you like it. This is going to take some time. How long did it take you to complete the project of 100 new golf courses?
Well, Amy, I'd like to tell you that this is still a work in progress
Okay.
for two reasons. One, I knew going in I wanted this to be a framework for my life. It provided the structure, and just like building a house, then you have to fill things in. And I didn't want this to become my whole life. I was writing, I was traveling, I was learning what it was like to live as Kym without Steve. And I did initially set a year goal.
I think that
And
would be hard, right? Because especially because you said new courses, so you're not allowed to just go to one course 100 times in a row, right? Okay.
and can I explain why I chose that?
Sure. I would love to know. Because it does make it more complicated because once you've gone through the, 4 or 5 golf courses that are near you, you've got a whole new process.
Yes. What's amazing is we often look at our environment as a way to determine how we feel. If I'm looking at something pretty, it's easy to be peaceful and relaxed. And when I was watching Steve when he was ill, I could easily focus on his decline and be sad and feel powerless or frustrated. And as a longtime yogi and meditator and studier of how the mind works, we can use our imagination. We can time travel in our mind to a different place or experience to find that better feeling emotion, regardless of what's going on around us. And then our physiology responds. So I knew with Steve or missing Steve, there were so many places we went, so many familiar places that I could go to and very easily feel sad because I would miss him there. So I could, in my grief or in my unsteady place, easily allow the outside to influence me because it takes practice to see beyond what is right there in the moment. And I didn't want to make it harder on myself than I needed to. Let's let myself already miss Steve and then let the new start to say, okay, these are the new experiences I'm living. The memories are still here. Pick something new. Then it's fresh, and I can have the opportunity to pick how I saw it. And there were times I'd want Steve to be there, or I'd point things out and think, oh my gosh, he would love this. Look at that striped winged hummingbird. That's or striped tailed hummingbird. That's neat. Haven't seen that before. And And yet, I knew the emotional landmines could easily be triggered if it had a previous memory of Steve. So that was why I chose new. Give myself a chance to stay steady a little more internally in a very unstable time.
So you've got the challenge of 100 new golf courses, and then what I hear you saying is that you were being very intentional with the new portion, that you wanted to allow yourself to create new experiences, not tied to places that you had already gotten memories. All right. And so you're still working through this. How many of the 100 have you done?
I've done 76.
Oh, that's a
In
lot.
November, we were going to finish by Christmas, and then my dog I came back to the van, had a lame back right leg, which required surgery
Okay.
and months of physical therapy. And that living in a van, which I've done 70% of the time since Steve is gone, is a little challenging. We needed to come
Oh,
home.
so all right. So you're based. So you live in a van, but it's not full time. So you do like van travel, but you have a home base.
Yes.
Okay. All
So
right.
home base, and I live in the mountains. So with snow and winter, it was a good pause button to say, okay, now if golf is part of this new life for Kym, what else do I want to put in the mix? And it's given me a chance to meet people like you and do podcasts and write the book proposal for the space between each shot, which will navigate someone through grief and golf.
All
I'm
right.
excited to share that. So it's given me an opportunity to do new things until I get back out, and we're close with spring weather on the horizon.
Very good. How much of the year do you spend on the road then in your van?
Probably about 70%.
Seven. Oh, you did say that. 70%. So when it starts to get, do you stay in the mountains when it's like cold and snowy, or do you use that as a time to get out
I
of the cold and
usually
snow?
like to get out. I go to the
Okay.
Central Coast or the desert. It's beautiful.
All right. Very good. And so that's how, what's the farthest you've gone in pursuit of these new golf courses?
I went to Jackson, Wyoming, so I decided I'll stay west of the Rockies, although Jackson's on the cusp.
Okay. All right. So this has all been domestic west of, I mean, golf courses are ubiquitous. And so, you've got lots of choices and so on and so forth. All right. So it's been an effective tool for you to work through this. How long? So 76 courses you've done. How long ago was it that you started this? When was it the year up? How long have you been working on this?
I would say officially, I said yes in February of last year, and I had maybe 10 courses in St. George and some around Lake Tahoe just prior to that. That could go into the total amount. And
So just over a year and a half?
yes,
All right, that's pretty fast. All right, so that's a lot of. So do you like? Yeah, that's a lot. How many are you playing? More than one round of golf then most weeks? No, one every other week.
I would there are weeks I would play say 3 in a
Okay,
week.
and
And there
then
were times I'd come home and I would write and I would spend time with friends and I'd practice at the range in the evenings.
okay,
And then I went to Seattle, for example, and I played 5 courses in 7 days and I thought, "Okay, that was too much. I'm exhausted. Let's recalibrate." So it's been location specific, how my energy was during that time frame. People would recommend courses. Well, now I want to deviate. Let's take this route. Let's try
okay.
something new. And so the original 100 list has shifted because of wonderful people contributing their ideas and this space for intuition to say, that sounds great. Let's go there. Or there's perfect weather on the Oregon coast at the beginning of October. Sunny, 70, no wind. You get 10 days like that a year. Let's go. And it's been fun to be able to meander in that fashion to make it really enjoyable along the way.
So when you started this, there's a piece of this that I don't think I caught on at the beginning. You actually made a list of 100 courses that you had it planned out. Okay, and then you've been using intuition and opportunity and all the things coming up to make those decisions. All right. So you talked a little bit about the impact of play and how it was helpful. Why do you think that this goal, this 100 golf course goal, it has worked? Why has this been so helpful for you?
The biggest reason, I think, is how I've titled this next book, The Space Between Each Shot. It's very easy to fill up our lives. And so that's okay. If we're doing it mindfully, I think we can enjoy it more. And so, for example, when Steve was ill, we cut things out of our lives, reprioritized on our time together because we wanted to savor that as much as possible. Well, I could very easily have just jumped into my golf adventure. And yet there was a disassembly period to say a lot of the daily habits, the mindsets, the stress, I wanted to disassemble that, disentangle that from what was going to move forward. I think the space in golf, you spend very little time actually hitting your ball. Let's say you hit 100 strokes. I'm more in the 80 range. but you spend a couple minutes each shot out of that 4 hour, 5 hour, 6 hour round.
Yeah.
There's a lot of space. And how do we choose to focus in that space? Feeling my feet on the ground, looking at nature, laughing with people, hearing their stories, connecting, finding a way to be comfortable in the unknown. That space is unknown. And even as we're moving through our lives, it doesn't have to be a big transition. We have space every day that we can carve out space between each thought. And I wanted to use the game of golf, which has a lot of space already built into it, to kind of mirror how I was moving into this next phase of my life and really honoring something new emerging without having to force it into being.
So has the way it has worked out, was it what you expected? Like, so what were your goals before you, if we not like, if we compare them, like your goals, what you thought was going to happen when you came up with the idea, 100 golf courses, versus how you feel about how it has impacted your transition and your grief 3/4 of the way through? Are they the same? Did you learn different things? What's been different?
I actually made that 100 list the very week Steve told me I need structure. So that was
Okay.
back in 2022. And that Kym would have said, "Oh, as soon as Steve is gone, I'm getting in the car. I'm going. I'm going to do it in a year no matter what." And I think the time of slowing down as a caregiver, of watching what matters, I think in this time we can be present with each other. And anytime, like you and me here, and the listener that's joining us, this is very special time. And I've learned to move at the speed of trust, not force it into being. I could have been devastated, and I actually did have moments of tears, wondering, why do I have to go slower with this? Why am I not done by Christmas? I want it to be finished. There's this satisfaction of having a goal and accomplishing it. And could I now step back and be satisfied with making progress, with taking the next step, with committing to my goal still and not giving up, just having it change shape, having it change a timeline? So that's one thing, giving myself.
So what I hear you saying is that you were you're obviously a very intentional planner type person based on this story. And so you think that before you started the goal, you probably would have been very much more completion driven, checking off the boxes, and that going through this has given you time to focus on and appreciate the value of letting things unfold at their own pace and appreciating the empty time. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Okay.
And playfulness is so fun. It gave that another reason why it worked is, again, it can be easy to get swallowed up in the sadness of grief. So to get out and cheer with people, golf is an independent game, but you're playing with other people to cheer on a great stroke, to celebrate something you see together, to watch a double rainbow come out on 18, to really appreciate the life I still get to live. It's wonderful. And to then celebrate that it's not a before and after, it's just a thread of continuity. And playfulness was something Steve and I enjoyed together, and he would want for me now. And I love to share with my clients and my students because, in that lighthearted, relaxed approach, our performance is better. We get to expand our perspective, be open to new ideas. And I just think it's more fun.
I think that that's an interesting component on this, and I'm not somebody who's qualified to talk about the brain, the way the brain works, or grief as an academic topic. But I think that a lot of self development and healing and going through transition can sometimes feel like homework. And like an assignment. And so I think it's very interesting that you chose and you emphasize that you chose something that is joyful and it's play and it's a game. And I think that's really interesting and something worth reflecting on.
Can I share something with you on that
Sure,
on that
absolutely.
subject?
Yes.
It's interesting because golf is also a sport. There,
Yes.
as a very driven person, I have goals. I've broken 80 a few times since I got back into it again, and that is very energizing. And one of the worst rounds I had was in one of those most spectacular settings. And what did I do the very next day? A friend came to join me. We played 9 holes just for fun, didn't keep score, laughed our way around. And then the next day I went out to play again and shot the best round of my season. There is something to holding it lightly and
Yeah.
keeping that playful spirit.
Very, very interesting. All right. So grief, okay, so here we go. You've done 76. I knew I was going to ask this at the beginning of the conversation. Now I'm coming back to it, but I did allude to it. People will not be surprised. Do you think that you need to do 100 courses to to learn these lessons? And you haven't even done 100 yet, so I guess the answer is implied no. But do you think you could have done 25 or 50?
Yes. And as I went back to write this book proposal, every chapter is a whole in golf. So there's 18 chapters. Each one has a characteristic, an attribute, a value that we hold that benefits us as a human, as a golfer.
Okay.
And I set it up so that the front 9 is the first 50 I played. I stopped and I played that 50th course twice because it was so magnificent. And I knew going in, I had multiple people tell me, let 100 be the aim, but don't let it determine your success or your definition of success in this journey.
Okay.
And I'm finishing because it feels good for me to finish. And yes, to answer your question, I find that I did make that transition from, wow, I'm doing this in honor of Steve and talking about Steve, to, wow, look at how this is developing me. Look who I am becoming as a result of this journey. And I'm so thankful that it gave me the chance to see myself and my future in a new way. And that was a big part of the start of the journey.
So then you'd probably, I mean, you won't know until you finish it, but you're not expecting any bombshell revelations between 77 and 100.
Well,
But we don't know. We don't know. You'll
I
have to
don't
come
know. I
back.
laugh
Yeah.
because, I mean, I'm open and curious and I keep a growth mindset.
Okay.
I will tell you, this is the first time being home, and this is the house in which Steve made his transition. We did a lot of projects here. I bought pavers because we had some septic work done prior to his passing, and I just now undid that first pallet of pavers to start making the labyrinth in the front yard. And I had a very sad weekend. That surprised me. I didn't see that coming. And yet it made sense.
Yeah.
So I trust that this is going to be an ongoing process, and that's okay. I want it to be organic and I want it to be fluid and seamless so that, again, it's not before and after. It's all making me the best version of myself along the way.
All right, very good. So you had a set goal. You were going to do a memoir about Steve. You were going to do this project. You're turning this project. You got a book that you're writing based on the
Yes.
100 golf courses. That's very cool. Okay, so grief is something that is very interesting because, like it or not, it is going to touch almost everybody. I would say everybody. Like, I'm not a big person for like absolute statements, but I think that grief touches everybody. You could have had this experience, you could have given yourself the challenge and never gone. It could have been a private experience, but you have chosen to write the memoir, write the golf book, come on the podcast and tell the stories. What is the motivation for you for sharing this personal story? Who are you hoping hears it, and what do you hope that they will benefit by? What do you hope that how will their lives improve by knowing this story of yours?
Amy, I think you're spot on in saying all of us will experience grief at some point. It could be losing a loved one, it could be losing a job you love, a pet, it could be a move where you lose your community.
Yeah.
It could be an injury where you lose your sense of ability to do the things you once did for some time. So I don't think we are immune from this concept. And this is what makes me tear up. I think we're liquid love, looking for places to flow. And we flow that love in joy with the people around us, with the activities we do, how we show up and express our interests and our curiosities and our overflow of compassion. And grief feels like wait, that door got closed. How am I going to flow love now? And it almost feels stagnant. And it was, that's the hardest part I found along this process, where it's like, but I want to flow love to Steve, but I can't now in the way I used to. Or talk about those other examples I just mentioned. It's like the door closed on that expression of love. But that's just one side of the coin. We have so many avenues we can still flow our attention and our curiosities and our passion. So, the first thing I was remembering in this process, and I hope the listeners understand this as well, we are liquid love looking for places to flow. And when we have those moments of grief, it's more than okay to say, wait, let's turn that back on me for a while. Because it's okay to flow love back to you until that soothes the sadness or the hurt or the confusion or the misunderstanding or the wanting answers that we might never get. And then there comes a point where we go, okay, I'm ready to flow that love in new ways again. And the avenues show up. I got to use golf. I've met some really amazing people along the way. I use it in writing. And it makes me tear up because we do have this in us. And we just, sometimes grief is like we've shut that valve for love, but it's there. Let's keep it open in as many ways as we can.
Very nice. Very nice. All right. So you describe yourself as a nature loving yogi. I would add that you're also clearly a golf enthusiast. And the audience can find you at swagtail.com, correct? All right,
Yes.
very good. You have a special offer for the audience, which is called Maximize Your Attention Training. It's a video training. Normally, people can buy it for $99, but there's a link in the show notes and the show description on YouTube where people can access that. The easiest way for the audience to get the links is always to be a subscriber to Imperfect Adulting email community, and then it just shows up in your email box, but it is in the show notes and the show description. I want to say thank you very much, Kym, for that very generous offer. Are you ready to wrap this up with my final two questions?
Yes, let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. These used to be random, but now I'm getting a little more systematized with this. All right. So, never before have we had so much information at our fingertips, but personal recommendations I think are really, really helpful. So, it's kind of a vague question, but share with us a recommendation for a movie, a TV show, a wonderful book, an audiobook, a podcast, something that you enjoy that you think that people in the audience might also enjoy.
I recently listened to Dan Brown's audiobook.
The
It's
new
his
one?
latest book. He wrote The Angels and
He
Demons
wrote The
and
Angels and Demons, and he's got the new one. I listened. What is it called? It's something,
The Secret of Secrets.
I think that's it. I think, did you like it?
I found it very fascinating if you're into consciousness, but the story is brilliant. The setting is in Budapest. It's just spectacular. You just want to go in and explore. Riveting.
All right, that's a very good suggestion. You listened to that on audiobook?
I did.
Me too. I listened to it on audiobook. I listened to this on audiobook and I was on a road trip. I found that the beginning, it took me longer, I thought, to get. I had to like it took me longer to get into it than I did the Angels and Demons. I think that though is because I was not already aware of sort of the like mythology behind this story. Like I had to like learn it as I went, as opposed to like when it was like the churchy thing, I was like, oh, I kind of know some of this. So
Yes.
yeah,
Agreed.
that's so. But I thought I did. That's why I tell people I'm like, it is good, but you just kind of have to get over that first time. It's like you can't expect it to
Yes.
be what the other book was. All right, very good. All right, that is a very good suggestion. I want to thank you for that. And then here we go. I call this one unsupervised online shopping. So we'll see if this meets you. What is something that you have purchased online that you think was pretty great and everybody should know about it and consider it for themselves?
Oh gosh. I'm on this kick right now where I get coconut water
Okay.
and yuzu juice, and it becomes like this own like natural Gatorade. It's delicious.
So coconut water, and what's the other piece?
Yuzu juice.
Okay.
It's like this Asian blend of grapefruit, orange, and lemon. It's just refreshing.
How do
It's a
you spell
springtime
that?
delight.
How do you spell that?
YUZU.
YUZU. I never would have gotten that. YU. Never heard of it before. Absolutely going to look for it at my Asian grocer. Super fun. Very good. That is an excellent suggestion. Making your own Gatorade so that it'll be a little less sweet, because Gatorade has kind of a lot of sugar for most of us, if we're going to be honest. And not that it's not yummy, but it's a lot of sugar. It's a lot of sugar. All right. Very good. That is it. Thank you very much, Kym, for being a wonderful guest today on the show.
Thank you for having me, Amy.
Thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the show. Before I go, I want to encourage you to become a bigger part of the conversation. Please subscribe wherever you're listening or watching the show. That helps my stats. A request from the bottom of my indie creator heart is to please tell your friends about the show. That is the real way new people discover it. If you feel motivated, I would love it if you rated the show or wrote a review on whatever platform you are using. Please be sure to head over to imperfectadulting.com and sign up for the email community. I call this the Village. You'll get some free stuff right away, and you'll begin to get the weekly emails that I send. This includes the links for special offers from any guests on the show and cool stuff I put together for the community. There's a lot more going on than just this show, and the only way to find out is to get the emails. Plus, you're busy. You don't have time or desire to follow every single tidbit on social media, and you don't have to, because I'm happy to send it to you. If you have a story you'd like to share with the audience, I have an open application for guests. Guess where you'll find it? That's right, on the website and in the emails. And that's a wrap for this episode. Until next time, remember that the journey is the destination. Ralph Waldo Emerson said that, not me. Well, until just now. I did just say it. But what I want you to hear today is that if your adulting journey isn't going the way you expected, that just may not mean you're lost. It may mean that you're just on your way. And now, the fine print. The Art of Imperfect Adulting podcast and streaming video show is a copyrighted work created and produced by Amy Stone and Amy Says So. The music was written and produced by Todd Thompson at Dharma Bomb Studios. All rights are reserved. Anything expressed on this show is offered as entertainment, and the views of the guests may not always represent the ideas and viewpoints of the host. That's me. Amy Stone does not intend to hold myself, herself out to provide professional advice or recommendations of any kind. In the end, you and you alone need to make those kinds of decisions based on your personal and individual situation, needs, circumstances, and comfort level. Yeah, it's a little weird for me to talk about myself in the third person, but you get the idea. This is Amy Stone, signing off.